Have you ever stood at the edge of a crowded room, a party, a gathering, a celebration that everyone around you seemed to be genuinely enjoying, and felt something you could not quite explain to yourself, let alone to the people who kept asking why you were so quiet? Not shyness exactly, not antisocial tendencies exactly, something more specific than either. A kind of internal pressure, like a frequency slightly too high for the room, like a signal trying to maintain clarity inside an environment specifically structured to produce noise. And then afterward, driving home or walking alone through the cold, something that felt almost guiltily like relief. Like a breath taken after a long time underwater, like the restoration of something that the gathering had quietly, persistently been draining. If that experience is familiar to you, you have probably spent some portion of your life wondering what it means. Whether it means something is wrong with you, whether the ease that other people seem to find in crowds and parties and social density is a capacity you simply lack. A deficiency in your social wiring, evidence of some inadequacy in your relationship to other human beings. Whether the relief you feel when you leave is something you should be ashamed of, or something you should simply accept without examining too closely. Yuval Noah Harari's work and the broader body of thinking about human consciousness, evolutionary biology, and the mechanics of how modern social environments interact with different types of human minds suggests something entirely different. Something that reframes the experience not as a deficiency, but as a form of sensitivity, not as a failure of social capacity, but as evidence of a particular quality of awareness that in the specific conditions of contemporary life finds the standard social environments of the modern world genuinely, measurably costly in ways that other people with different thresholds and different internal architectures simply do not experience with the same intensity. The conscious person who avoids parties and crowds is not avoiding other people. They are avoiding a specific set of conditions that make genuine consciousness difficult. And understanding why requires understanding something fundamental about what consciousness actually is, what it requires, and why the particular social environments that modern culture has normalized as the default setting for human connection are, for certain minds, the precise opposite of what genuine inner life requires in order to function. To begin where Harari always insists we must begin, with the evolutionary history that built the human mind, we have to recognize that human beings did not evolve for the particular social environments that modernity has created. For the vast majority of the time that our species has existed, social life meant something very specific and very limited. A group of approximately 150 people. People you had known your entire life. People whose histories, motivations, capabilities, and characters were transparent to you, not because you had studied them, but because you had lived alongside them, day after day, through the full accumulation of shared experience that actually knowing another person requires. In this environment, every social encounter carried meaning and consequence. When you entered the group's shared space, you were not entering a room full of strangers performing versions of themselves for an audience they would never see again. You were entering a space populated by people whose relationship to you was dense, specific, and ongoing. The social information available in any gathering was not overwhelming because the gathering itself was small enough to be comprehensible. Every face was known. Every dynamic was legible. The social world was, in other words, scaled to the cognitive and emotional capacity of the minds that had to navigate it. This is no longer the social world most people inhabit. And the distance between the social world human minds evolved for and the social world they are now required to navigate is, Harari suggests, one of the most underexamined sources of the specific kinds of cognitive and emotional strain that conscious, reflective people experience with particular intensity in crowds and at parties. Consider what a modern party actually is, from the perspective of a mind trying to process it honestly. It is a room containing typically more people than our ancestors would have encountered in several months of ordinary daily life. Most of them strangers, or at best acquaintances, people whose inner lives, motivations, and actual characters are almost entirely unknown. All of them simultaneously performing social selves that are curated to varying degrees for the occasion. All of them generating a density of simultaneous social information, expressions, body language, tonal shifts, subtext, status signals, group dynamics, interpersonal tensions that would have been in the ancestral environment the product of months of accumulated observation compressed here into a single evening. For certain minds with a higher baseline sensitivity to social and environmental information, minds that process this density of input more thoroughly rather than more selectively, a party is not primarily a pleasant social gathering. It is an information processing challenge of considerable intensity. The signals are too numerous to ignore. The subtext is too loud to tune out. The gap between what is being said and what is actually happening, between the performed version of the gathering and the actual dynamics running beneath its surface, is too visible to pretend not to see. And here is where Harari's insights about the nature of human social performance become particularly relevant. In his work on the large-scale fictions that organize human societies, Harari has consistently drawn attention to the degree to which human social life, at every scale from the intimate to the civilizational, is constituted by shared performances, agreed-upon fictions, collaborative pretenses that everyone maintains simultaneously because their maintenance allows cooperation, belonging, and the management of the tensions and contradictions that any group of human beings inevitably generates. These performances are not lies exactly. They are the social equivalent of the useful fictions that Harari identifies in money, in nations, in legal systems. They exist because without them, the friction of actual human reality, in all its complication, inconsistency, and mutual incomprehension, would make collective life unworkably difficult. But for the person whose consciousness is calibrated to perceive with unusual clarity the gap between performance and reality, between the social surface and the actual dynamics running beneath it, this understanding is not merely intellectual, it is experiential. They feel it in every room they enter. They notice it in every conversation they navigate. The party, with its particular density of social performance, its particular pressure toward a specific emotional register, its particular requirement that everyone maintain simultaneously the fiction of relaxed, spontaneous enjoyment, is an environment that demands a very specific kind of participation. And for the conscious person who cannot quite stop seeing what is actually happening beneath the performance, participation means something different and considerably more demanding than it does for someone whose perceptual filters are calibrated to take the surface at face value. This does not mean that conscious people cannot enjoy social interaction. It does not mean they do not need connection, or that they are incapable of warmth, intimacy, or the genuine pleasure of being in the presence of people they love and understand. Quite the opposite. What it means is that they require for social interaction to be genuinely nourishing rather than merely draining, a quality of exchange that the party and the crowd, by their structural nature, are almost incapable of providing. They require, in other words, depth. And depth is precisely what the social environments that modern culture has normalized as the primary setting for human connection are architecturally designed to prevent. Think about what happens at a party. The environment is loud, by intention and by convention, loud enough to make extended, complex conversation physically difficult. The social expectation is for light, mobile, multi-directional exchange. A few minutes with one person, a rotation to the next, a performance of social ease maintained across multiple brief encounters. This format serves certain social functions very well. It allows a large number of people to make or maintain superficial connection with each other efficiently. It creates the feeling, if not always the reality, of collective celebration and shared warmth. It allows individuals to present curated versions of themselves to multiple audiences simultaneously and to receive in return the social validation that these presentations generate. What it does not allow, what it is in fact specifically structured to prevent, is the kind of sustained, deep, genuinely exploratory conversation that the conscious person actually finds nourishing. The kind of conversation in which ideas are followed to their actual conclusions rather than their socially safe stopping points. The kind of conversation in which contradictions are acknowledged rather than papered over. The kind of conversation in which two people genuinely attempt to understand each other's actual inner experience rather than performing mutual comprehension for the benefit of the surrounding social environment. This kind of conversation requires time, requires quiet, requires the absence of social pressure to maintain a particular emotional tone, requires the freedom to be uncertain, to change direction, to say something tentative and exploratory rather than polished and conclusive. Parties, by their nature, provide almost none of these conditions. And for the person whose primary mode of genuine connection depends on these conditions being present, the party is not simply less enjoyable than it is for others. It is, at a fundamental level, the wrong kind of thing. Like offering someone who is thirsty a beautiful container with nothing in it. The form is there, the social ritual of gathering and exchange is there, but the specific substance that makes it genuinely nourishing to this particular type of mind is structurally absent. Harari has, in various contexts, discussed the particular challenge facing what he sometimes describes as highly conscious or highly reflective individuals in the modern social environment. One of his central observations is that the development of genuine self-awareness, the capacity to observe one's own mental processes with a degree of clarity and honesty, tends to make certain things more difficult rather than less. It makes it more difficult to participate unreflectively in social performances whose artificiality you can see clearly. It makes it more difficult to maintain the comfortable illusions that allow most people to move through crowded social environments without the particular kind of friction that clarity produces. It makes it more difficult to talk about things that do not matter as if they do, and more difficult to maintain the pretense that the superficial exchange the party provides is equivalent to the genuine connection it promises. This is a specific kind of social cost that is rarely discussed openly because it is easily mischaracterized. The person who struggles in parties and crowds is typically described as shy, as antisocial, as arrogant, as lacking the social skills to participate in ordinary human gatherings. What almost never gets considered is the possibility that the difficulty is not a lack of social capacity, but an excess of social perception. That the problem is not that the person cannot read the room, but that they read it too completely, and what they read there makes the performance of easy enjoyment an act of ongoing suppression that, repeated across an entire evening, produces the particular exhaustion that conscious people describe when they talk about what parties cost them. Neuroscience has begun to offer partial explanations for this experience, and Harari's evolutionary framework illuminates what the neuroscience reveals. Certain individuals are born with nervous systems that are, in the technical sense of the term, more highly reactive to environmental stimuli than the population average. They process more information more thoroughly before generating a response. They are more sensitive to subtlety in social interaction, to dissonance between verbal and non-verbal communication, to the emotional states of the people around them. In the ancestral environment, in a group of 150 people, navigating complex social dynamics in conditions of genuine scarcity and genuine physical threat. This sensitivity was not a liability. It was, in all probability, a significant advantage. It produced individuals who could detect threats earlier, read social dynamics more accurately, anticipate conflict before it erupted, and navigate the complex landscape of human motivation with unusual precision. In the ancestral environment, this sensitivity was deployed in a context scaled to its capacity.